Do video game achievements or trophies mean anything to you? Are there any specific ones that were memorable to get, and have you ever gotten one that just wasn't worth it? Or maybe gotten an achievement unlocked at a time that wasn't really the most appropriate time for a triumphant achievement unlock fanfare? I think achievements are an interesting mechanic, but despite being in the vast majority of published games these days, there isn't much that's been said about the concept as a whole. There are some that are widely regarded on an individual level, maybe they're coveted or notorious, but typically there's not much discourse beyond that. Achievements suddenly came about on the Xbox 360, and I guess they were a good idea because everyone, except for Nintendo, followed Microsoft's lead. I remember seeing them when they were new, and at the time I didn't think much. They seemed kinda cool, but I didn't give it a second thought because they were just something I got for playing a game I was already playing. But one thing I remember changing my perspective was an achievement I unlocked in the game Fear. I was fiddling around with the explosives, trying to get a feel for how they worked, and I blew myself up a few times. You know how it is when you're playing a new game. When that happened the 5th time, I unlocked a secret achievement. It was for 5 self-inflicted deaths, to euphemize it to YouTube's liking, and that achievement was worth 0 gamer score, a mark of dishonor, sort of a joke, and I mean, it was pretty funny. Now before that point, I'd never really seen this feature used for anything but something like beat level 4 on Heroic, or get X number of points in X amount of time. You know the drill. And unlocking this Fear achievement was when I realized there was another layer to achievements than what Microsoft probably had in mind when implementing the feature. There's a little bit more going on here than a standard milestone for completing some part of a game or basic challenges. And it got me wondering who would make such a thing. Whose decision was it to put that in the game? They must have had a weird guy on the development team of Fear, huh? But it got me thinking more about the entire concept. What makes for a good achievement, or a bad one of course? Was that achievement good? It was certainly a lot more memorable than most of the ones I've seen up to that point, but it wasn't exactly a proud accomplishment, you know? By now, I'd think there would be sort of a robust design philosophy for these things because they're in basically every game, and the good ones can really add to the experience or duly commend players for what they do, and bad ones can be kind of an embarrassment to the game or those who unlock them. At best, just being ignored and being a waste of text. I know achievements are not anywhere near the biggest game design challenge of the utmost concern, but a near omnipresent mechanic shouldn't be an afterthought. So how do achievements affect the game, and why does anyone actually care about them? What might their high-minded purpose be? Well, to start with, I don't think all of them have a very good effect on their games. Sometimes, in the torturous hunt for some of the worst achievements out there, I start to wonder how such cruelty came to be. In the best cases, achievements can enrich a game by drawing you outside your comfort zone, leading you to having fun doing something you never thought you might enjoy, like engaging with some new mechanic or a game mode that seemed too daunting or uninteresting to try before. Or, you know, using a weapon or strategy that didn't seem all that useful or fun. An achievement offers a guideline that might show such hesitant players a way to have fun that they might not have expected they'd enjoy. That's the best case scenario for achievements, offering a good time. Of course, it doesn't always work out that way. When an achievement inspires somebody to go out and do something they were not predisposed to do, there's absolutely no guarantee that they will have a hidden affinity for it. Sometimes people know what's best for them. The thing about achievements is, if you have a bad time pursuing them, it's not really the game's fault, right? Because who but yourself is to blame if you stubbornly persist in pursuing such an optional challenge. But I don't know. Achievements are an invitation. They are the developer openly challenging you to do what they ask of you. So they don't really escape scrutiny in my book. They are a game design element, and so they should be held to some standard. And if they fail to meet that standard, then they're fair game for criticism, just as any other game design choice should be. Achievements are created with the knowledge that some sect of players is going to ruthlessly pursue them, perhaps with more fervor than anything else the game offers, and so they should be designed with some grace. And on the flip side, if an achievement is encouraging you to do something fun that you already knew you liked, you were probably going to get it anyway. So what's the point of having it be an achievement? Some achievements really do ask a lot of you, and overcoming a challenge like that can be rewarding in its own way, but the course of following an achievement usually isn't as rewarding as anything the game itself can offer. You know, like finally defeating a really hard boss in Dark Souls or something. And there comes a point in every gamer's life when they finally see the achievement that they know just isn't even worth thinking about, and you come to terms with the fact that you're not going to get them all. Except for the obsessive completionists who really do try to get every single one. But even they're bested by a few examples that I'll talk about. There are a few schools of thought, I guess you could say, for what achievements should be. Some of the common purposes of achievements are to recognize great feats. There are some achievements that you unlock as milestones for simply progressing through a game normally. I don't think these ones tend to make a very strong impression. They could be seen as participation awards rather than anything that's really worthy of unlocking something. Some achievements are designed to encourage players to play the game in a more fulfilling way without necessarily being super challenging. Like, you know, get 5 kills with every weapon so that you at least give them all a chance. And again, this is something that arguably defeats the purpose of an achievement, but it's something that has some practical value to it. Meanwhile, other achievements are just there in service of a joke, maybe that mark of dishonor, or being there for some kind of clever meta purpose. And of course, who could forget the achievements that are just there to be a giant waste of time? Most achievements I can think of fall into at least one of these categories. And outside of recognizing great feats, it's kind of debatable whether these other categories really do a good job of being achievements. At the end of the day, achievements are what you make of them, but they're also designed with a specific intention in mind, and whether they live up to that is something I want to talk about. What makes them good or bad? It's pretty obvious when you start thinking about that not every developer puts the same amount of thought into the design of achievements. When discussing what makes things good or bad, it can help to look at the extremes, which exhibit the fact that there is such a thing as a bad and a good. While there's a lot of competition, when I think of the worst achievement you could ever conceive, I always think of one from Ghost Recon Advanced Warfighter, which asks the literal world of you for a whopping 40 gamer score, requiring you to get to the top of the universal leaderboard. That's right, first place global leaderboard, best stats in the world, nothing less. Which is, you know, practically impossible because you're competing with the entire world, to say nothing of the cheaters occupying the leaderboard. That would have made it literally impossible for even the very best player to achieve it. Now, there's a philosophy of debate for achievements. Are they supposed to be participation awards? Which, not to demean the concept, they can be useful to show who's actually beaten a game, but some think they should be valued more, being for players who go above and beyond just playing a game normally. In this line of thought, achievements should be generally unreachable to the average player. After all, what is an achievement even worth if just anybody can get it without even trying that much? Even if they do have a useful application, they're certainly not memorable. No one cares about those ones in and of themselves. The ones that are memorable are the ones that are out of reach for many. Of course, they should never ever be like the Ghost Recon example, where they are practically, if not literally, impossible, but should instead be realistic goals for more dedicated players. You probably don't want someone who casually plays the game for a short time to get all of the achievements, but you also don't want all of the achievements to be literally impossible for a highly skilled, highly dedicated player with too much free time. Because if such a player cannot earn the achievements, who can? They have to be for somebody. There's a balance to it. You should at least have some achievements that are beyond the ability or interest of the average player, otherwise the concept as a whole is devalued and there's no glory to be had at all. What is the biggest factor that makes achievements inaccessible to the many? Sure, there's the somewhat rarer category of achievements that are just genuinely really hard, too hard for most people, but usually the biggest gate that adds to the rarity of achievements is the time commitment, not the difficulty. And this is where I start to really dislike them. When an achievement asks that you waste 500 hours solely to unlock it alone, not many people are going to be interested, and rightfully so. I don't think that's usually intended, Only the most sadistically designed achievements would be deliberately made to take that amount of time. But what's far more common than pure sadism on part of the developers, I think, is underestimation of what they're asking for when they make these things. And a lot of the time, what pushes an achievement that seems reasonable on paper into insanity is the factor of randomness. Even well-designed achievements can require some time commitment. It's one thing if you have to, improve upon your skill until you're good enough to earn an achievement. That's cool, that's rewarding. But if you have to keep rolling the dice, gambling with your time to try to farm some stupid item or get the right multiplayer map, or do something else that requires the right set of uncontrollable random circumstances, well, that's not fun, and that's not something to be proud of, so what's the point? It's a waste of time. The fastest way to make an achievement way worse than it needs to be is for it to rely on circumstances beyond the player's control. Like getting kills with something that only appears on a map that isn't in common rotation, or playing a game mode that no one queues up for. A compounding issue with this type of thing is if the actual demands of the achievement are genuinely difficult. It's really a nightmare when you have to do some difficult task that you barely ever even get the chance to try. But a randomness-dependent achievement can be worse than the hardest of the hard, even when it's easy on paper. I want to tell a story about some achievements from Halo, the Master Chief Collection, which had all the Halo games available for a single matchmaking lobby. Now, say you need an achievement that asks you to play in Halo 2 Anniversary. Well, back in the day before they let you choose which games to filter, this alone was already asking a lot because the game used to have one of the worst nightmares you could imagine: democracy. The tyrannical majority of Master Chief Collection almost only ever voted for Halo 3 morning, day, and night. The Halo 3 Mafia enjoyed absolute control, and they actively conspired against your opportunity to get any achievements in any other game's multiplayer. So even in the 1 out of 10 times you got into a match that wasn't Halo 3, there were still 3 other games in the running against the one you needed for your precious achievement. So then what? What are the achievements actually asking you to do? Oh, nothing too hard, just get 20 kills with the Hornet, which only appears on specific game modes on one map. You'll get to that map eventually, right? Well, sure, but guess what? Other people want achievements too. Even those players who don't care at all about achievements still aren't always going to pass up the opportunity to get acquainted with the littlest gunship. And suddenly you're competing with your own teammates, still further potentially being denied even a chance. And you make it to the cockpit, well, guess what? Some spiteful teammates would just blow you up for beating them to the Hornet. And even if the stars align, you get to Halo 2 Anniversary, you make it to the Hornet, you don't get betrayed, your enemies get a vote too. They are not just going to let you get free kills. That's the thing about multiplayer. You're in a random lobby up against thinking human beings who are going to try to beat you however they can. And they're not very interested in letting you get a kill on them in a specific way. This is why it's a very bad idea to put achievements dependent on weird, unusual circumstances in multiplayer. There was another one, also in Halo 2 Anniversary, that sucked, where it asked you to kill 50 players with environmental destruction, like shooting exploding barrels or something. These barrels are not littered all over every map. They're pretty uncommon, actually. They're not even on every map at all. Now, asking you to blow up enemies with exploding barrels is a pretty reasonable achievement in a game like Half-Life 2, where the enemy is an AI that is deliberately programmed to stand on the ricketiest wooden platforms overlooking truckloads of explosive barrels. But real people, especially good players, are not going to hang around in exploding distance of explosive barrels. And they can very easily make it completely impossible to progress an achievement like that. Just don't stand near the explosive barrels, or, what a lot of people do is they just preemptively shoot them to make it so that can't even happen. What then? You'll often find yourself absolutely powerless to progress what should be a pretty simple achievement. Even if you were the absolute best Halo player in the world, what are you gonna do? Maybe you can just hide and watch those barrels the whole time, waiting for the perfect opportunity for somebody to walk into them. That'll give you a better chance of progressing the achievement, but your teammates probably are not going to appreciate your commitment to the achievement hunt. There's sort of a tragedy of the commons with achievements in competitive multiplayer games because they encourage people to act only in the interests of the achievements. Especially when there's a rare circumstance that doesn't come up much, people are not going to care about the fate of this particular match when something that countless games can go by without a chance to progress comes up. And they will sabotage their team in an effort to exploit that opportunity. And while I'm picking on Halo, Halo 3's original release had a ton of these silly achievements. Achievements that would be like, do some really rare and impressive feat that a lot of players never do in their lives, and you have to do it on a specific map, or too bad, it doesn't count. The best part of it all is that a lot of these map-exclusive achievements were DLC map-exclusive achievements, and these ended up being the bane of my achievement hunt. Because a map-exclusive achievement is bad enough, a DLC map-exclusive is even worse because players weren't guaranteed to have that map, and if you got matched up with a single person who did not have the DLC, there was a 0% chance you would even get the right map. It doesn't even matter now because all of these achievements are unobtainable now, since matchmaking services were shut down for that game. Now, my point here isn't really to malign Halo specifically. You can find things just like this in all kinds of games. Multiplayer achievements on console games, at least, all have an implicit deadline to them, because those servers are gonna get shut down one day. At some point, they'll be completely impossible, so what then? Overall, multiplayer achievements tend to be my least favorite because you have all these compounding factors, and there's so much lack of control. Not just because you're up against humans, but because you're also being matched into random maps and game modes and stuff. You can go game after game without even having a chance to progress these achievements, and when that opportunity comes, it can easily be pretty much impossible to execute on. But there's still plenty of room for single-player achievements to be miserable as well. Plenty of single-player achievements are designed with unrealistic expectations, sometimes encouraging experiences that are detrimental to what the game is trying to accomplish. One of my least favorite achievements was a whole set of 6 in Mass Effect 1. These achievements asked you to keep the same companion with you throughout the majority of the game. This included the majority of side content, which took up quite a lot of time. And because you can only have 2 companions, this meant the game was asking for 3 full-length playthroughs minimum. Long-form achievements that demand you to play the game over and over are probably the worst thing a single-player achievement can do to waste your time. These ones in particular go further than just that, though. The way these achievements are worded, it's not entirely clear to everyone what they're asking for, and there's not any sort of in-game tracker either. It's actually easy to beat the game with no achievement while thinking you're on the right track the entire time, meaning players will make the commitment they thought the game was asking of them and get nothing. If you do side quests as they come, you can easily overshoot the requirement and make these achievements impossible to get, which the game will not tell you, and this is especially a problem if you settle on companions that come later. But the worst thing about this achievement is probably that it makes the game less interesting. Those inclined to follow it will wind up with a more boring story. Mass Effect was actually pretty thoughtful with how things can happen based on which companions you bring along. There will be some unique banter and conversations based on the combination of characters with you. And if you're doing a quest that's related to a companion's race or backstory, where they have some stake in that particular mission, it's usually more interesting when you bring that character on the quest. They'll often have special dialogue that adds some perspective, and sometimes it can even change the outcome a little bit. kind of rewarding you for putting thought into who you bring on the mission. But if you're hunting for these achievements, that all goes out the window. You miss out on all of it because you're supposed to just bring the same 2 people with you on every single quest. It might sound crazy that I'm saying so much about a few little achievements, but in this case we know somebody in the industry saw these as bad because the remastered Mass Effect collection totally reworked these achievements into something way more palatable. The remaster has it so instead of doing the entire game with each possible companion, you are instead only asked to perform 5 missions with each companion. A human being in the development team saw those achievements as a problem to be fixed, and I'm inclined to agree with them. It can't just be me. The contrast here serves as a great example of how achievements can be utilized to a game's benefit versus sabotaging the developer's efforts and acting contrary to the game's design. The original iteration of these achievements has no purpose but to waste your time, asking for 3 separate monotonous playthroughs that offer you a narrower perspective of the game's characters. And it's not an interesting task to do, it's not a respectable feat to be revered, and it certainly isn't fun, not with how long it takes. Like 40 hours per playthrough. The new ones, by contrast, actually encourage achievement-minded players to play the game in a more interesting way, to mix things up and give all the companions a fair shake, potentially in a single playthrough, which in a game like Mass Effect, with its emphasis on characters, is a more fulfilling way to experience the story, making it a far better use case for an achievement than the monumental time sink of the original. And also, unlike the original, this achievement is going to be pursued by more players because it's not asking you to play this 40-hour game 3 times. It's just asking you to change the pace occasionally while you do as you were. While I think achievements ought to actually challenge you in general, making them accessible can be a really good idea if the purpose is to encourage people to experience the game in a certain way, a more complete way, like these ones do. And bear in mind, this is the same game we're talking about in both cases, just with 2 separate sets of achievements, and one of them is far superior in that regard. And it probably made a pretty big difference in how some people approach the game. It's pretty common for developers to take lightly a request to play a very long game several times. While your single-player achievements are definitely not going to be as subject to randomness, I am no fan of excessively long-form achievements. It's really bad when that happens in games that aren't really great fits for recurrent playthroughs. Like, if it was a roguelike or something, that's one thing. But when I finished Mass Effect, I was definitely not eager to play it again start to finish. And it's the same with stuff like open world RPGs. Simple achievements can easily build into excessively long time commitments, all for the sake of something that just isn't very interesting or commendable, which appeals to no one, except for people who enjoy achievements in and of themselves, I guess. And that's why I think the worst thing a single-player achievement is likely to ask of you is for some specific task that will require an entire playthrough. And it doesn't just happen when you have an achievement that requires a task to be performed over the course of a whole playthrough. It can result from missing something that you have no opportunity to return to, which is especially painful because the opportunity is usually so easy, but you can't go back for it. Like if the game has no level selection and it's an 80-hour open-world RPG. Marathon 2's Xbox release had a Vidmaster Challenge achievement, which in addition to many other requirements instantly disqualified you if you ever pressed A to activate a switch, which is very easy to do by mistake, trust me. Story time, because there's nothing hypothetical about this example. I have personally witnessed mass suffering inflicted by the pursuit of this achievement. Marathon 2 on Xbox Live Arcade had that Vidmaster achievement. Never press A on a Switch, kill all mobs, etc. The game also had leaderboards, which I ended up near the top of, and I'm not saying that to brag, I'm sorry, but I'm bringing it up because people saw me on the leaderboards and they actually invited me to help them get achievements, and I usually said yes. But time after time, when we were trying to do the Vidmaster Challenge, they pressed A on a Switch at some point, and it was game over. The entire campaign rendered pointless for what they were trying to do. There was this one time I was with a group of 6 people who invited me, and I told them, I warned them. I tried to warn them. Don't press A on a Switch. Don't even bother trying to heal. It's not worth it. You might accidentally press a Switch. It's co-op, so it's okay if you die. Don't worry about healing. But so many people kept hitting switches by accident, pressing A instead of punching them, slipping up for that one moment. And our merry band of marathon co-op players was just dropping like flies. It was like losing people to the plague. By the end, the only person left was the original guy who invited me, and myself, but that didn't really matter because I already had the achievement. Everybody else who made an error caught themselves and realized their mistake and just left. That guy who invited me was the only one who got the achievement that night, and there were like 5 unhappy people who played with us. Maybe the real achievement was the fun we had along the way, right? Well, I didn't say that at the time because I don't think they would have found it very funny. Anyway, this didn't really come up because I extensively briefed everyone on the hazards, so people knew when they screwed up, but you could easily try for an achievement like this and inadvertently make the simple mistake. You miss something, you overlook something, you accidentally press A on a Switch, you don't pick up that stupid bobblehead when you have the one chance to do it, and you're none the wiser for the rest of a playthrough as you go on your merry way and beat the game, and then you don't get the achievement and you don't know where you went wrong. Just look at Fallout 3. The energy weapons bobblehead is a symbol of easily missable achievements. It's located in a base you visit once during a highly scripted, straightforward sequence before you blow the place up and never go back again. And this is in the middle of like an 80-hour game. And yep, if you missed that bobblehead, you're out of an achievement. In a similar vein, you can have achievements where you might have to get to the very end of the game and then beat it a certain specific way to get a certain ending. Elden Ring has like 5 of these. It's not a short game, by the way. And you can easily lock yourself out of specific endings. You only get 1 per playthrough, so you better make it count. Tough luck if you put yourself on a path you've already done before. The stakes for this kind of achievement are way higher than I think they ever should be. When everything depends on that final moment, which is something you have to play an entire campaign to get to, and one small mistake at the end can ruin everything. In a similar vein, you have Left 4 Dead, where there are achievements requiring you to play a whole campaign through and escape in the final level. If a single player makes it to the extraction zone while everyone else is knocked out, the game just instantly ends, and there will be no achievement for you. It's a great opportunity for griefers to ruin your day. But even teammates who want to help you, who want you to get the achievement, can't do anything once the cutscene is triggered, because you can't even restart. In that respect, it's worse than getting wiped out, because your only choice is to do the entire campaign over again instead of being sent back to the beginning of the level. In short, single-player achievements can spiral way beyond reason when they implicitly ask you to play the whole game again and again. Worse yet if it's just for missing some minor point and you don't have any kind of level selection or anything. That's one of my least favorite things about achievements as a concept. Some games remedy this by offering in-game achievement menus that will show you which ones are still available and stuff, and if you failed it'll be grayed out or something. But in the majority of cases, no joy. Most of these types of bad achievements seem inadvertent, like they really just didn't know what they were asking for. I want to talk about how that can really shine. One of my favorites is Dark Souls, with the side content achievements asking you to get all the weapons, miracles, or rings or something. And this might require you to spend hours farming or trying to find online content that no one even engaged with when it was new. It's bad when the easiest ones of this bunch are the ones that ask you to play through the game up to 3 times. Getting all the miracles requires you to engage with all of the game's covenants, basically maxing out all of them, which makes it almost feel insulting that each individual covenant unlocks its own trophy, and all you get from maxing out each of them is a whopping 1 measly silver trophy, despite that being a lot harder than just actually beating the game for a gold. What's funny is that Dark Souls was deliberately designed so that you can technically unlock every achievement offline for those that don't have membership in PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live Gold, and that also future-proofs them so that these achievements will never be unobtainable even when servers are shut down. That seems really thoughtful, but the way you have to go about unlocking these things offline is some of the most torturous item farming. I highly doubt the developers put themselves through that misery. Now, I've talked about the multiplayer games getting shut down issue, but another one is that sometimes single-player content will actually have achievements become unavailable. I saw this in Arma 3, where balance changes with the vehicles made it impossible to get a certain achievement that required the destruction of an enemy APC with a single artillery shot. You just literally couldn't do it. The artillery got nerfed or the APC armor got buffed or something. Either way, you could not make it happen the way that it was originally designed to work. So yeah, even weird patches and stuff can alter the availability of achievements in single-player games. Another really bad tendency is to draw things out, just demanding unreasonable long-term commitment from the player, such as by having complete X number of daily challenges. Well, the number might not be outrageous on paper. Say you have a game where a daily challenge typically takes 6 minutes and there's an achievement for doing 100 of them. So 600 minutes or 10 hours. Quite a lot, but not really crazy, especially if daily challenges are something you do a lot of in the natural course of a playthrough. You could finish that on the way, right? Well, how many daily challenges are available at a time? Say in this hypothetical the answer is 1 per day. Then you're on the hook for 100 separate days to play this game. Made up example, sure, but there are a lot of developers that I would expect nothing less from. And I know that this type of achievement exists in games like Binding of Isaac and Call of Duty World War II, which I haven't played, but hey, you know, it's out there and it can always get worse. So, besides what I see as fundamentally bad achievement design, there's another layer to achievements that's even less considered, the sort of meta issues they might have. And this can be a lot worse, because at the end of the day, all the pain brought on by a bad achievement can be entirely avoided by simply not caring about it. You can ignore any achievement's existence and be none the worse for it. But what I'm talking about now is the kind of thing that can sully a moment in your first time experiencing a game's narrative, which cannot be undone. Seeing an achievement at the right time can really add to the experience. So if you were looking forward to it, especially like getting a salute from the developers or something, but at the wrong time, they can be detrimental to the game's narrative, which is a monumentally bad thing for them to be. They're just not always appropriate, which is doubly true when they tend to come with some fanfare and a snappy title, which can be really unwelcome at some times. Maybe there's a boss fight that's supposed to be tragic when you win. That sort of thing is diminished when you have an achievement praising your triumph, complete with the title boasting about how great you are for defeating the boss. They also kind of deflate tension. When you get an achievement for beating the boss, you now understand there's not going to be a second phase or something, even if they do a fake out in a cutscene where it looks like the monster isn't really dead. You got the achievement, you know. Achievements are another layer to the game, and I suspect that they're often designed in vacuum without serious consideration towards how they actually add to the scene that they pop up in. Achievements can also contain spoilers. Most developers avoid this simply by having any story-related achievements be hidden achievements, but this presents its own obvious problems. For example, that you might beat the game without getting them all, then what? And sometimes things that aren't necessarily big story spoilers still mean the game is tipping its hand and spoiling some minor development, like telling you how many weapons there are or some smaller thing like that. If there was a game that had a mid-game plot twist where zombies show up, seeing an achievement in this hypothetical example that says kill 10 zombies is a pretty lame way to find out about such a twist. Tunic has some great examples of how to word an achievement without giving things away. The subject matter of this achievement is a pretty major spoiler, but odds are I'm not spoiling anything here because I don't see how you'd guess what this is even talking about if you haven't played the game already. Sorry if I'm wrong. I feel that certain other games could learn from this kind of effort, although this is kind of a double-edged example because it is, in fact, a hidden achievement, and I feel like it didn't really need to be. I think generally achievements being hidden should only be done either when it's something you're basically guaranteed to stumble into, or things that really, really need to be held in secrecy. I feel like we have an overabundance of hidden achievements, and the need to make them hidden could be avoided entirely just by wording their requirements such that they don't spoil what they're asking for. There are occasional intentionally bad achievements, like they're doing a meta thing where they try to be clever, like Stanley Parable and its unobtainable achievement. It's an achievement that legitimately cannot be unlocked. I want to say they're not as funny as they think. That kind of thing is very much thematically in line with the Stanley Parable, but come on. Some things are sacrosanct. Maybe that reaction is what they're going for, but something about this feels even worse than Ghost Recon's ridiculous impossible leaderboard achievement. Now, normally cheating is something that ruins the point of achievements and only discredits yourself to your friends when they can tell that you've done it, but I would be pretty tempted in a case like this just to prove a point. Stanley Parable has a lot of interesting, weird achievements that are there to turn the concept on their head. In addition to the one that's impossible to get, they have one for not playing the game for 5 years, which, well, the easiest way to get that is to cheat. I guess it's notable that it's an achievement that you can get after you die, so nice. There's one achievement that is just the game's cheeky way of informing you that you cannot jump when you inevitably try it. There's one achievement where the narrator declares that the requirements are too easy, so once you would have unlocked it, he starts adding more and more requirements to get it. One for playing for the entire duration of a Tuesday. Definitely some really interesting achievements here, at least on a meta level. I wouldn't say any of them are my favorites, but they had fun with it, maybe a little too much fun for our own good, but at least somebody had fun thanks to these achievements, right? Now, achievements can be nice and all, but as a reward unto themselves, there's something detached about them. They can never do as good of a job as the games themselves recognizing your feats. You know, when you see the spiritual stones and medallions fly down at Link in Ocarina of Time, there's a fanfare that plays and you get a badge on your quest progress screen. It advances the story in a real way, and it's even reflected in the save file select screen. That makes achievements seem rather underwhelming by comparison, and it's true that not every achievement warrants such grandiosity, but the point here is to illustrate that a mere achievement in and of itself does not act as a substitute for having the game present your feats as being awesome. Those measures did the job of making the player feel a sense of pride and accomplishment, surely enough, and it was no small thing that, unlike capital A achievements, this is part of the story and it means something within it. The achievement systems we have nowadays only offer more in that they're visible to other players and are measured between multiple games. So it's questionable how good of a thing they really are. No reason you can't have both, but achievements are at least no substitute for a game building its own sense of significance. Something I'll touch upon briefly is the idea of black mark achievements. Achievements that signify some failure, not a success. They can be funny, although they're nothing new at this point. It's interesting to think about, though, in a game where you get an achievement for dying for the first time, you can never unearn that. Someone must have beaten the game without ever getting that one. Probably not on their first account, but still. I don't think these types of things are some terrible feature, but kind of contrary to the intent. On a similar note to how you cannot unearn such an achievement, you also can't earn achievements a second time. You don't even see the display, the notification, if you do the exact same thing a second time. Meaning there's a sort of singularity to achievements. Some games might have an in-game signifier that can help out here, but usually not. This means that your first playthrough will experience things in an inherently different way, as the opportunity to even track which achievements are happening is gone forever. And if achievements were supposed to incentivize you towards a certain pattern of play, that is also gone on any repeat playthroughs. There are some achievements that really do add to the experience, so the inability for them to be on offer again might make things less interesting. And woe to he who plays on his friend's account. No recognition for you. This is especially relevant when it comes to how achievements keep track of the date and the order in which you earned them, but again, only once. Sometimes you unlock achievements in a less dignified way than others will have. Like you might die and then someone else in your party will finish the task for you while you sit there in spectator mode and it still counts. Or you kill some boss, bam, achievement unlocked, defeated the boss, but then you die too, so you have to beat the boss again. This time with no achievement. And that's the funniest thing, since achievements are one and done, you can never undo this. That will forever be the way you got the achievement. What I mean to express here is that not all unlocks are equivalent, even for the same achievement where all the same requirements are fulfilled. An achievement saying be on the winning team can mean you got carried super hard or you single-handedly won the game for your whole team.
Oh, that was good.
Maybe you played solo and somebody else played co-op, and both of you get the same achievement to show for it. A justly played, hard-fought boss battle versus a cheese or a glitch are both equally valid according to the metrics. People might unlock an achievement in a way that is a grand, impressive journey, while other people might just use console commands. And there's always cheaters to consider. Usually they're not very subtle because they'll have 100%ed every game they've played for so much as a minute. But they do exist, and they do cast some doubt on any hard-earned achievements. A lot of games, in light of this, shut you out of achievements for things like using mods, which is a well-intended effort to maintain the value of those achievements for people who did have to do things as the game was designed. Bethesda's notable for this practice, but usually it just tends to punish people who have, like, some fairly innocuous mods that aren't there to cheaply unlock achievements. So, bottom line, achievements don't necessarily tell the whole story. Some games get creative with their achievements, sometimes too creative for their own good, but oftentimes games just phone it in and offer nothing interesting. You know what I mean. Achievement for beating the first boss, then the second boss, then the third boss, and beat the game, and then nothing else. If that's all that's there, what's the point? It doesn't offer anybody anything. Well, it's not entirely true. They have a practical utility in those cases, but again, still building up to that. Something else that's been burning a hole in my mind is the addition of achievements into old games that might even have predated the concept of achievements altogether. Now, this is something that is not necessarily bad, but it's a curious phenomenon, especially when you consider that the developers of the original games, in probably almost all of these cases, had nothing to do with their creation. They can be kind of a case study to demonstrate how achievements might actually impact the experience, since we have two separate releases, one where the batch of players had achievements to worry about, and then the original, which did not. As an example, Resident Evil's GameCube remake didn't have achievements originally. There were some unlockables and stuff, but I'm not as drawn to those, you know? Who cares if I get the infinite rocket launcher when I've already beaten the game? But the Steam release offered achievements. Now you have my attention, and I will do your stupid challenges for 3 hours. I'm just that kind of guy. But you know what? I did all those annoying tasks, beating the game in 2 hours, beating it without ever saving, and it sucked when I died 2/3 of the way through the entire game without having saved, and then I had to start all over again. But still, it was pretty cool to get those achievements. It forced me to dig into this game that I had played a long time ago, but now more deeply than I ever had.
You did a fine job.
I don't really regret the challenge, except getting that efficient at playing a survival horror game kind of defeats the purpose of a survival horror game. Proven mastery can be disappointing in that regard, but I still had fun, despite the game being the same one that came out, 20 years ago. And if you had fun, then I guess the achievements are worth it. But it wasn't all good. From the same game, a lot of the issues that I've talked about are present. None of the achievements are really that bad to unlock, but there's achievements for getting every random combination of your friends killed, which isn't interesting to do and takes a lot of time, and I didn't like it. There's achievements with quirky, funny meta jokes in their titles, so you get a hilarious one-liner in your immersive survival horror experience, which kind of undercuts the narrative. Like, true story, the first zombie kill I got in the Steam release was from cheesing a zombie that I had trapped behind a dresser, which which, for one thing, wasn't exactly a dignified moment worthy of unlocking an achievement, and that's a general issue with achievements, I guess. But that aside, this is a horror game. You're supposed to be kind of worried and confused, and killing your first zombie is supposed to be intense and unpleasant. An eerie calmness follows. It's a very atmospheric game, you know? And what better way to dispel that atmosphere than punctuating this crucial moment in your journey? Your first zombie kill with an achievement, which makes this funny joke about the situation. That's kind of bad, especially if this is the first time you've played the game. I mean, for me, I'd already played the game before, so I didn't really care. Put all the funny jokes you want in. But for the hypothetical first-time player, that probably would have been pretty lame. So these newfangled post-hoc achievements can offer veteran players a rewarding new challenge to have a new spin on an old game that they've played before, or they might offer a distraction. It all depends on how they're implemented and what you make of them, but they're a mixed bag, sort of a microcosm for how achievements are in general, I guess. I talked about the Marathon Xbox Live Arcade Vidmaster achievement, and that one is really notable to me for a couple reasons. Namely, this asked me to play the game in a completely different way than I ever had, and it was a game I'd played since I was a little kid. And so I did, and all of us, that one fateful, horrific night, experienced that, which we never would have had it not been for the existence of this achievement. Moreover, the Vidmaster thing wasn't just the team that ported the game taking it upon themselves to write up some ridiculous challenge. The Vidmaster challenge was a thing in the original games. The people who ported the game to Xbox just made it into an achievement. And that's really interesting because it's incentivizing this challenge that most people didn't know about or ignored, drawing a greater number of people into playing this game the way the original developers were hoping that the pros would. The achievement was sort of awkwardly implemented. It's not really my favorite, but it is still pretty cool to see the original developers' intentions actually respected, brought to new light in an achievement that a game gets retrofitted with in this way. And it resoundingly proves that the developers of that port were trying to respect the original game when they made these achievements. Now, I've said much about achievements, but it's mostly been framed in terms of Xbox and Steam, so here's some historical trivia about PlayStation trophy lore. Trophies were not implemented on the PS3 at launch. If you were like me and you had that launch day fat PS3, it would have been a good year and a half until trophies were added. That was in July 2008. So with the PS3 launching in November 2006, there was quite a substantial time between those points where there were some pretty notable releases. Games like Oblivion, which were a formative memory for Xbox gamers to first start their achievement hunting career. Well, if you had it on a PS3 like I did, not only was it impossible to cure vampirism because of a PlayStation exclusive bug, you also couldn't trophy hunt because they didn't exist yet. And so any multi-platform release in that window had to go without trophies on the PlayStation side of things. There was no unlocking any cross-game reward metrics for PlayStation gamers, while Xbox players were spilling gamer score all over each other, popping the champagne that was those achievements. It must have been a bitter sight for Sony, and about half a year after trophies were first implemented, they became compulsory for all games just as achievements had already been on the Xbox 360. What I think is most interesting about this time for achievements is that many PlayStation games were retrofitted with trophies, receiving patches to that end, which was not a common thing to do at the time. Many games were not really released with the expectation that they'd be getting big updates, but all these patches were added purely in service of implementing their own achievement equivalent. Even though achievements are obviously not an essential feature, one that you might freely disregard, they apparently have great importance in the eyes of the movers and shakers of all the industry's biggest platforms, as evidenced by this sort of thing, their mandatory inclusion in basically every game. While achievements are obviously not an essential feature, publishers treat them as such. They are mandatory on these platforms. So they apparently have great importance in the eyes of the movers and shakers of all of the industry's biggest platforms. Another general issue with achievements is that they are very disparately valued between games. Two games that offer 100 gamer score for, say, beating them on their hardest difficulty might be in totally different ballparks of challenge. Not all games are as difficult as each other to begin with, obviously, and some games offer achievements only for the hardest of the tasks available in them, while others pass them out for free. This is one of the reasons that the concept of gamer score didn't really take. It's basically just a general measure of how much you play games, maybe how many games you play. It's not really a way to show how unyieldingly committed to the challenge you are. For people who care about stuff like gamerscore, they go to GameStop and spend $1 to rent Avatar: The Last Airbender, play it for 5 minutes, and walk away with 1,000 gamer score, which is a lot to get in 5 minutes. When I saw that that was possible, I knew that really the only thing that mattered here was the individual achievements themselves. Relatedly, achievements and trophies are typically implemented with some ratio of high-ranking ones to low-ranking ones. You've got your bronze, silver, and gold trophies culminating in 1 platinum for getting them all. On PlayStation. On Xbox, you've got different gamer scores per achievement, traditionally summing up to 1,000. Steam doesn't really have a per achievement hierarchy like this, though they do have their own platinum style award for getting all achievements in an individual game. The reason I bring all this up is to point out that these relative differences between achievements, these rankings, whether it's the difference between gold and bronze or 110 gamer score, it's all totally arbitrary. You don't even have to compare them between different games. Even in an individual game's achievement roster, you can have a bronze trophy or a 20 gamer score achievement be the hardest feat, and golds and 100s that are super easy, basically participation awards. And this might be the best proof you're gonna get of developers perhaps miscalculating the difficulty associated with these achievements. Most people probably learn very quickly that you don't really learn anything from the assigned value of achievements. Only the achievement itself and what it entails proves anything. Platinum trophies are a bit of an exception though, because well, they speak for themselves. They mean you've done all of them. They actually do have some popular esteem to them, unlike, say, how no one cares how many gold trophies you have. Platinums might actually get a second look for people who care about that stuff. But again, the exact game in question still carries a lot of weight there. On a more fundamental level, there's kind of an issue where achievements can dissuade people from doing what they want to, which is sometimes good because sometimes players have it in their minds to play a game in a way that isn't necessarily the most fun. But when a game offers a lot of interesting choices and people feel obligated to constrain their choices to align with achievements, that can really be a self-defeating way to design a game. Like if you get an achievement for the goodest possible ending, people are going to be really reluctant to face the consequences of their decisions if those decisions would lead them anywhere but best ending. Better still if you have your evilest ending, your renegade playthrough, to go hand in hand with the goodest ending. With the 2 playthrough requirement now, people are going to feel that their natural, mere, neutral playthrough is a waste of time. And achievements tend to reward extremes like that. Do the most in this or that direction, nothing in between. It's interesting that achievements can sometimes encourage a broader gameplay experience for individual players, but they also lead to a convergence in aggregate player decisions. I don't know, I know it's a weird complaint, but a lot of people will play the game such that they unlock achievements, right? But I think one of the most interesting things about games is how people uniquely express themselves through them. And achievements that require one specific mode of play discourage that. They put everyone in the same pipeline. The worst case is when it starts to build into this mentality of, why would I do that when there's not even an achievement for it? And I think that sort of outlook is cheap. The achievement itself isn't really the fun part. A great example of how achievements can perhaps disincentivize individual player expression and cause players to miss a lot is Dead Space, with the 1 gun achievement for only ever using the plasma cutter across an entire playthrough. Aside from, the entire playthrough commitment that I've talked about, I actually think this is a good achievement. It's a cool and interesting, different way to play the game. Provided you've already played the base game to begin with and seen all the cool and exciting, fun, varied weaponry that the game has to offer. Probably picked a favorite that not everybody will agree with you on, you know? I know for a fact that a lot of people are just gonna shoot themselves in the foot with that kind of thing and go for that kind of achievement in a first playthrough, which means that they would never see how unexpectedly good the line gun is or how unexpectedly terrible the flamethrower is. And that's part of the fun. Now, on the contrary, there's not as much to say about what makes an achievement good besides the obvious. Achievements offer an easy way for a game to set itself apart, or to help players broaden their gameplay experience before putting a game to rest. They potentially can give you a good sign that you're done with the game. If an achievement is memorable, actually requiring me to do something different and interesting, and in doing so is actually fun, I'd chalk it up as good, great even. All an achievement needs to do is be fun and memorable for me to consider it to be in the upper echelon of achievements. Unfortunately, a lot of them are bare bones, simple, and not that interesting, and the ones that are remembered are usually not so recognized for the joy they brought people. Rather, the memorable achievements tend to be infamous, like the bad ones I've been talking about. So, the simple standard of fun and memorable excludes probably the vast majority of achievements. This is all pretty obvious stuff, so I'm going to talk more about the more novel and interesting fun things that I've seen done with achievements. First off, though, they do have an important practical utility to them that I keep mentioning. They hold players accountable. It's harder for someone to deceive others about what they may have done in a video game these days, or to doubt someone who's telling the truth when an achievement can prove that a particular feat was accomplished. Of course, there's no way to prove it wasn't your older brother or a paid video game player's service or something, but hey, still a lot more credibility than a baseless claim provides. Anyone can say they did anything, but having the achievement on your profile is usually pretty solid evidence. They also give players a disincentive against the kind of rule breaking that can so easily occur in the course of a self-imposed challenge. This stuff might not matter at all to you if you're not a teenager, like, holding other people accountable or whatever. But I know when I was younger and less mature, achievements were a helpful asset in my friend group for us to grill each other. And we had the word of God to see who had done what in each game. It was fun to have the means to interrogate each other about our feats and put people in their place. With achievements, we knew which friends only played Halo on easy, or didn't play the campaign at all, and could thus confer the proper disparagement. Or, offer help if we were feeling charitable. It's also useful to be able to see how far your friends are in a game by what achievements they've unlocked. It's a great way to know what spoilers you still need to keep quiet about when discussing a game they haven't beaten. The measure of progress aspect is a very useful application of achievements. Also, when achievements make a good few thousand people suffer the same miserable character building nightmare, at least it gives them something to talk about. And what better reason is there to play a game than to have something to talk about? Take it from me. I think there's genuine value in that kind of thing. Shared experiences are an important part of games. It's a big part of their cultural impact. Anyway, a lot of achievements are frankly jokes. Some of those jokes are actually funny and don't make 500 wasted irrecoverable hours the punchline. Portal 2 did that funny thing with the part where he kills you. At first, when they were making that joke, they had a couple iterations where one person says it, then the next. I thought it overplayed itself a bit, but when I saw the achievement pop up, they got me. So that was a clever touch that we only got thanks to the existence of achievements. Possibly the most famous achievement of all, certainly the one I've seen referenced the most, is from Dead Rising, and it's called Zombie Zombie Annihilator, as the remaster calls it in algorithmically appropriate terminology. After all, in this game about brutal, savage, extremely graphic violence, you wouldn't want to ruin it by using something like the G word. Anyway, it's a memorable achievement. It requires you to kill 53,594 zombies. The joke with this number is that it's the stated population of the town that the game takes place in.
Willamette, Colorado. Population 53,594.
Because of the humor there, this achievement gained significant recognition. Many other developers started to reference it in other zombie-focused games, which have sometimes gone as far as to literally get one over on Dead Rising by asking you to kill 53,595 zombies. Pretty cute. It was a funny thing to see these games doing, and it only made the original achievement ever more influential. Sort of a cultural meme that was in this weird achievement layer of games. That's a really interesting cultural phenomenon. You know, to have this widely recognized thing that only exists because there was an achievement for it. There's no one in the game who's like, Frank, you gotta kill 53,594 zombies. It's just an achievement that references an offhand line of dialogue. That being said, you don't need to earn the achievement to get the humor in it. You will be privy to the joke just by looking at the achievement. And the achievement itself isn't actually that fun. I wouldn't call it a good achievement by my own metrics, despite it being funny and memorable and probably deserving of its reputation for that reason alone. The only way to reasonably get this achievement in the limited time span that Dead Rising allows is to drive a car through a tunnel over and over again, and it's really boring. Other games with similar achievements don't tend to be much better, by the way. Still, I guess I'm glad this achievement exists, even though it's not fun, because I still admire its cultural impact. For me, it's one of the iconic things about Dead Rising. For some reason, I have it in my mind that Dead Rising is the game that put achievements on the map. I was young when it came out, but I think it was a big factor in what got people really talking about achievements to start with, especially with its most notorious ones. Part of what must have made it so great in the achievement department must have been that the achievements don't just unlock themselves for their own sake. The harder ones give you special in-game unlocks to go with them, which adds tremendously to the appeal. When achievements and in-game unlocks go hand in hand, you have something greater than the sum of the parts. Achievements don't have to be completely divorced from the game. Having an in-game tracker complete with actual in-game rewards, perhaps, really keeps them feeling more intertwined with the game instead of being some weird meta feature. You don't have to go far at all with this. Like Halo 3 had achievements unlock multiplayer armor, which isn't a big deal, but it grounded them, I thought. You have both a monument to your accomplishment that everyone can see, and you have a tangible in-game reward that you can use. That's a great combination. Incidentally, the fact that achievements act as a monument that shows the date and time you unlock them is something I really appreciate. In the grand scheme of things, it's probably my favorite thing about them, because they help me look back and reminisce about when I first played a game and what I did in that first playthrough. And it helps me put a number on what year I first played a game. On a platform-wide level, the Xbox One did something kind of cool where you could unlock new wallpapers for your dashboard through associated achievements. Each achievement came with a new background, giving them a bit more to offer. Some 360 games would also give you gamer picks or avatar rewards, which I think people cared about for a little while. And that got me thinking, right from the start with the Xbox 360, every achievement came with its own little icon, and some of those had decent amount of personality to them, which I thought added a little bit to the game. Like all the Fallout 3 quests have a little picture of Vault Boy doing the thing, and that's not anywhere else in the game. I think it's kind of weird that they didn't offer those as gamer pictures, I guess. I mean, why not, right? You got the achievement. Think about how much less we could have seen the Angry Monkey gamer picture. Not only can achievements add a bit of character with their titles and pictures or whatever, but also they might actually say something interesting. Sometimes achievements can be used for effective tone setting. I've talked about how they can be detrimental, but they can also be good in this regard. The snappy title doesn't have to be an off-putting joke. It can also be something interesting that actually gives you a little lore snippet or something. It might be an insightful comment. It might give you pause to think about what's happening. It's kind of an unusual use case, but I think it's a pretty good one. Achievements nowadays usually include metrics on how many people earned them. This is a great feature that's interesting for a few reasons. First, it lets you see which achievements are actually measures of distinction. But more than that, it also acts as a measure of progress to everyone who's played the game. You can see how many people did what kinds of things, which is just really interesting data to have. Not the intended use case for achievements at all, but a really interesting result nonetheless. Story time again. The 7-Day Survivor achievement from Dead Rising, a game whose achievements I praised earlier. Well, this one wasn't fun, it sucked. It required you to play for 14 hours straight to keep Frank alive for the 7 in-game days in the game's survival mode. You could not save your progress. You could not quit. I saw that as a kid, and it stayed in my mind for years. I loved Dead Rising, but I totally lacked the commitment to get that sort of achievement. But I didn't forget. It became my white whale, the one that got away. I revisited the game as an adult, and I went back, and I got that achievement. And let me tell you, that was a gigantic waste of time. I feel like an idiot for doing that. 14 hours, no fails. One continuous playthrough. Not actually that hard, but with stakes the likes of which have seldom been seen in any game. An outrageously long commitment. Yeah, that's one of the worst I've ever done. I mean, imagine failing after 13 hours. I'm kind of embarrassed to have unlocked this one. There's no dignity in playing Dead Rising for 14 hours straight, and it's not even an impressive feat. It's just a time commitment thing. The greatest testament to unlocking it would have been to your Xbox 360 managing to run for 14 hours without shutting down. Not whatever you did. And I didn't have fun. Most of the time spent wasn't even playing the game. It was reading or something while planning around Frank's meal times to make sure the baby had enough pizza to survive for 7 days straight before I could be content in letting him die. I didn't feel proud of that one. But hey, I learned my lesson. Fortunately, unlike Captain Ahab, I was graced with the opportunity to repent, and I've learned to avoid ever going that far again. Dead Rising has obviously been a prominent point in this video. That's not because it's a random game that I like. When I was young and we still had gaming magazines, you know, I think it was about 58 years ago, a lot of contemporary Dead Rising reviews in those magazines cited one of the game's strong points as being its achievements, and I remember concurring. That was probably the first game where I found myself purposefully pursuing achievements, and even the ones I didn't try were still interesting to think about. I certainly thought more about 53,594 than I did about getting 2 kills from the grave on Orbital in any ranked playlist. I really do think Dead Rising was a trailblazer with achievements because the game is really open-ended and kind of loose, where the main story being failed doesn't actually feel like that big of a deal on its own. You're on a strict time limit, but failing the main quest lets you keep going and you can still find plenty to do. With achievements as your guideposts. Fail the main quest? Well, you can still save 50 survivors and you'll have more XP when you try again. Beating the game isn't really the goal of this game. It's meant to be replayed a bunch, and you even get a prompt to start New Game Plus every time you die. It's really easy to miss things, but the game's kind of short, so you can have multiple runs fixated on specific achievements. So it really did feel that the achievements were an integral component of the game's design. And while some of them are really bad, as I've painstakingly explained, even those were still creative, especially by the standards of the time. The achievements at least had interesting ideas, and were the main thing that pushed you into playing the game to its full extent, which was a really novel use of what was at the time a new mechanic. Despite all I've said, I feel like I have yet to answer the question of what's the deal with achievements? So here's a few more lingering thoughts. I think the $1 million question is, who designs these things? Who makes achievements, right? Is that a job at a studio, achievement designer? Probably not, you know. It must be one of the developers who does something else. I don't think much collective thought or effort on part of the developers goes into designing achievements. I mean, why should it? It's not that important, but still, there are some games where a lot of thought is put into it, so I figure in some studios, you have like the visionary behind the game, micromanaging, telling them, you know, Kojima wants this to be an achievement. Whereas in other games, they're designed by a vengeful intern trying to sabotage the company however they can. But I have no idea. And also another weird thing is that you know how achievements can be unattainable through some patch? Well, patches can also be used to add achievements. In fact, that's a pretty normal thing to come along with expansions. Was actually a selling point back when achievements were pretty new. But that kind of thing usually stops after a few years. But sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you get an unexpected comeback. And that breeds a certain weird insecurity in my mind. When Gabe Newell added new achievements to Half-Life 2 20 years after it came out, it meant that your long-lost friend, last online 11 years ago, we all know one, who proudly earned all the achievements in Half-Life 2, did so only for an update to be added with a bunch of fun new achievements. But he's not going to earn them. He's never going to play Half-Life 2 again. His Forsaken Profile's epitaph of perfect games has forever been defiled. Some food for thought is that almost everything I've talked about can just as well apply to any in-game method of rewarding players. All of the annoyance or fun is just as readily available wherever there's any kind of token or acknowledgement. Quests completed percentage, say the assignments in Battlefield games, many of which are required along the way for certain achievements nonetheless. But unlocking these assignments or playing a game with optional side quests or collecting optional collectibles, all of it feels exactly the same as doing achievements. So with all this in mind, it brings forth the question of what makes an achievement an achievement. Are they special at all? What makes them any different than a game simply asking you to do something? And I guess the only answer to that really is that there's an achievement for it. At the end of the day, obviously achievements are not a big deal. They're not something to worry about, even if it can be annoying to miss out on them when you put in the work. They're what you make of them. And I guess now it's safe to say that they're never going away. I still enjoy them being designed creatively, in a good way. And sometimes I even remember to try to get them, even 20 years after their inception. Achievements are, in my opinion, most rightly used to trick players into having fun. It's often said that given the choice, players will optimize the fun out of a game. This is done in pursuit of the path of instant gratification, often resulting in a shallower and less fun experience in the long run. Achievements offer an incentive to the contrary, to guide players into more committed gameplay, with delayed gratification, but they also don't impose upon the game. They don't structurally change things so that you can't have the other kind of experience if that's what you really want. But if you do want that experience, they hold you to it. And that's why I say achievements are what you make of them. Overall, though, I think the state of achievements is, and always has been, pretty bad. The vast majority of achievements are not so fun. Many are so easy that they're kind of pointless, which isn't awful. Like I said, there's even some utility to that at least, but it's not exactly encouraging any show of hidden potential out of the player, you know? The game is the same as if they weren't there, so what's the point? And when they aren't so easy or straightforward, instead of being the interesting challenges you might want, they all too often end up being a big waste of time. Genuine difficulty can make things more interesting, but it can easily go too far. They probably shouldn't be dreadful, regrettable experiences. Developers don't always seem to know what they're asking for with achievements, especially when they rely on luck of the draw where you're basically gambling for gamer score. There's no achievement in winning a slot machine. It's not something to be proud of. It's something that you didn't do. It's something that happens to you. Getting lucky isn't achieving anything. Achievements are such an easy way to encourage fun, variable experiences, so it's pretty confounding how many of them demand you to do the same boring, repetitive tasks for hours on end. There has to be fun or satisfaction at some point in the process unto itself, because unlocking an achievement just doesn't bring those things. Getting the achievement itself is never the fun part. If the rest of the process isn't worthy, the achievement is a failure by design. And it's a shame that so many are like that, because there are games that do design achievements impressively. We know the concept has merit from cases where they act in service of encouraging varied gameplay experiences, offering worthy challenges or being a genuine mark of awe to other players, symbolizing the rare skill of the one who earned it, instead of being a shameful, unfulfilling time sink that will only symbolize to other players how silly you are for wasting so much time. There are achievements that people reminisce fondly about earning, and there should be more of those. But every bad, thoughtlessly designed achievement degrades the entire concept. Any already good game, at least if it's a game where achievements are a good fit, can execute on the concept effectively. Have this feature help instead of hurt, if they just put a little more thought into how the achievements are designed. But unfortunately, the reality is that achievements tend to be such an afterthought that common sense is a rare occurrence in their design, let alone the kind of thoughtfulness that can make them something truly special. As for me, I don't really achievement hunt. I guess you could say I'm retired. I take them as they come unless I see one that actually seems interesting or fun to get, or if I'm that close to platinum already. Otherwise, I've seen way too many awful achievements for them to have any innate value in my mind. But there are a few that I still think about.